Hey, welcome to section 3, Observables and Promises. In the last section we created our own custom Angular service. We looked at the set and get methods, defining the input and output, and sharing data between components. In this section we're going to dive deep into asynchronous programming. Then we're going to learn about observables versus promises. Then we're going to make some asynchronous requests using observables and then promises. In the last video we're going to look at the third-party package RxJS and the operators that help us work with observables. So welcome to the first video in section 3, Asynchronous Programming. In this video we're going to take a look at how asynchronous programming works, and then we're going to look at a JavaScript example of asynchronous programming. So first of all, let's just understand the notion of synchronous versus asynchronous programming. With synchronous code, you might have a series of events that are going to fire. One could be a button click, the next could be a down key move, the third could be a user typing some information. Now if our apps were synchronous, these events would happen in order. So you can see here in event 2, the example is that a user might click a button, and if that has to go off to an API in a database to return some data, the whole application is going to be frozen until that data is returned. Imagine if you were watching a YouTube video and you clicked a like button, and then the video had to pause while YouTube went off and registered that like in the database and returned a new amount of likes. It wouldn't work very well. So this is where asynchronous code comes in. You might have one event, a user might hit enter, then you might have event 2 where a user clicks a button, and the application needs to go off and get some data from an API. With asynchronous programming, it in effect creates a separate process which allows the main app to continue functioning, which in this example will mean moving on to the third event, and then event 2 will then return at some time in the future, whenever the data is returned. Okay, so I've got a little example here to show you. I've got a function which logs out a message to the console, and then I have 3 other functions which call this log function, and just output the piece of text here. So at the moment this is going to run synchronously. It's going to run function 1, function 2, and then function 3. So when our app's loaded, it loads them sequentially, 1, 2, 3. But imagine there was a step in between 2 and 3 where a user clicked a button. Now we can mimic that with the alert function. And let's just refresh the browser. So you can see 1 is run, 2 is run, and then the alert comes up and nothing else happens until this goes away. So you can see how if a user clicked a button and went off to a server to get some information, the rest of the application will be frozen. So let's look at how we can do that asynchronously. JavaScript provides a function called setTimeout where we can set something to happen in the future. So we can actually use that to show how we can move through our app. And JavaScript goes off to do something else while not freezing the app. So with that we can show how we can use an application asynchronously. So let's create a setTimeout function. That takes in an anonymous function. Then we'll simply call our log method at the top and just output that the asynchronous method has been fired. We'll set that to sleep, say 3 seconds. Okay, so let's see that in action. So you can see 1, 2 and 3 are all fired. Then later on, the asynchronous function fired. And the reason that 3 was allowed to fire, despite it being after the setTimeout function, is because it was asynchronous, and then came back when it was ready. So as we move through section 3, we're going to be using this notion a lot as we move on to observables and promises, and see how we can use that in Angular. So in this video, we've looked at asynchronous programming, and also looked at an example of how that works.